Howdly haydly YouTube, I'm back. I told you I was already working on some stuff in my last video, which wasn't that long ago. And yeah, I had no troubles finishing off a lot of good shit this time around. We actually have 6 items today because one of the things led into another, and I wanted to kind of have them in the same video because they're so closely related. So before I ramble on, let's just get started. First up, we got a couple of books. This one I got on Thrift Books, and I was actually, a lot of these books I've gotten on Thrift Books recently, but this one I was super excited for because I love this movie franchise, and I love to know how movies are made. The Making of Jurassic Park. So this is just a big book with lots of photos, the art they did, how they created the dinosaurs for Jurassic Park, and how the whole movie basically came together. So they go through all the different phases, like pre-production, production, post-production, blah blah blah. Michael Crichton, how he first wrote the book and how it came to be wanted to turn into a movie, sort of thing. So it's nothing more complex than that. It's just a retelling of how the movie was made. It was published, the book, in 1993, the year Jurassic Park came out. So it was very closely tied into the actual process of making the movie at the actual time. And the most interesting thing to me is, like I've said this before, how when you see the Oscars and you see some of these movies like Star Wars and the G.I. Joes and the Transformers and stuff like Jurassic Park, where so much stuff has to be created and new filming and effects techniques come about through these types of movies all the time, because just the innovation and the amount of work that goes into creating the props and the characters and all the other things that go into a movie has always fascinated me. And I find it disgusting when the Oscars gives out awards to the best films and stuff like that. That sometimes these sci-fi action adventure things that do encompass all of this additional work just tend to be not even considered, because of the type of movie they are, I think. Like when you're looking at a movie like The Notebook, just a romantic whatever, right? Like, it's just actors and settings, you know. I know work goes into that and stuff like that, but when you see everything they needed to do with Jurassic Park, the different, you know, first they build everything in miniature and they have people sculpting fucking dinosaurs and they look so goddamn real. And then, oh, let's turn this into full-size ones. Oh, and then for the T-Rex, we need a full-size T-Rex, then we need just a full-size head, then we need just a full-size rig from the waist down for some of the ground shots where it's just, you see its legs moving. And then we need to find a way to move this 18,000 pound animal and make it look real and make sure it doesn't kill anyone. And you know what I mean? Like, and then they have to do that too with the raptors and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, one of the T-Rexes in this movie was hooked up to like a flight simulator base that would make it kind of be able to move around and stuff like that. Just the insane amount of work and effort and materials that go into something like this. And then Jurassic Park, the computer graphics was kind of revolutionized on that movie too, partially because they couldn't do everything with mechanical dinosaurs, so they had to film things and then insert digitally afterwards all these computer graphic dinosaurs. So and then you have all the actors and the set building, and it's just fucking nuts what goes into making a movie like this. And it's always fascinated me, and I have way more respect for movies of this type than I do for just like a regular movie that really it's just actors and settings, like I said. To me, the amount of work, you know, you see on film during a sequence in Jurassic Park, it may only last half a minute or a minute, and to realize the amount of effort and time and material and money that must have just gone into making that half minute or minute scene is staggering. Yeah, it just I was raptly paying attention during this book, and the whole thing I just found completely fascinating. And I read, when I was kind of looking at reviews of this book online, that in Jurassic Park, in the gift shop inside the visitor center or whatever, There's actually a copy of this book on the shelf. It's just got a different cover on it, but the book is actually in there. But then I was like, is that true, or does somebody just make that up? Because how would they have the book finished to be able to put into the movie, you know, when the movie's not finished, when it's already put in there during filming, right? So I wasn't sure if that was exactly true or not, but if it is, it's kind of a cool little tidbit, right? So, but anyways, love the book, love Jurassic Park, love dinosaurs. Still 12 years old. Don't grow up, kids. It sucks. Next up, book 2 of the Shadow of the Avatar trilogy, called Cloak of Shadows. So after Elminster and his allies had that victory at the end of the first book, where they took that town back from the wolves, I think it was, and Elminster got his power back after Mystra took her power back, they had a new problem. So the gods are still roaming the earth. Magic is still backfiring on everybody. The realm is in chaos. So this group of shape-shifting creatures called the Malgrim, something like that, decide to take advantage of all this confusion and maybe make a play on eliminating Elminster and maybe taking over the realm for themselves and causing some chaos. So basically, the Malgrim they started off as human beings, but then magics or whatever turned them into these shape-shifting, evil-hearted creatures. They steal human women to use as their breeding tools and then dispose of them, and they're just basically these freaks of nature that can assume all sorts of different shapes. And the problem is you don't know until it's too late, right? And so yeah, they're in the process of weaving a cloak of shadows, which would allow them to move around unseen, sneak up on somebody like Elminster and try and do them in, sort of thing. So if they're allowed to complete this cloak of shadows, it could spell doom for the realm, right? So basically, Elminster and his allies are aware that the Malgrim are going to make this play, so they come up with a plan where Sylune, who is the ghost witch or whatever, is going to change her appearance to look like Elminster and travel with his new allies that he's been out with on the first adventure, Sharantir, the Knight of Myth Draenor, and then the two Harpers, Belkram and Ithar, and they're gonna try and draw the Malgrim away, and this little fake Elminster is gonna hopefully occupy them and prevent them from causing any chaos. And it works. The Malgrim attack them, and in the process they're able to slay, or the good guys are able to slay tons of Malgrim and put a little dent in their army. In the meantime, the real Elminster has been from afar causing chaos within the Malgrim hideout, which I think is called the Castle of Shadows. He's got this floating head of himself that's been running around and eliminating Malgrim, these little tactical strikes, sort of thing. So now, during all this action, Sharantir one night is approached by Mystra, the goddess of magic, and she's taken to this place where she's given this blue sword. And Mystra explains to her that this blue sword is capable of eliminating Malgrim, no problem, because the problem is with them being shapeshifters, they can move their organs to any part of their body. So a sword thrust through the brain, through the head, isn't necessarily going to hit the brain. Their brain could be in their dick, like it is with me, right? So they're hard to kill that way. So, and plus you have to kill them with silver. So Mystra explains to Sharantir that this blue blade is magically enchanted to slay Malgrim, so it doesn't matter. You just get them with it and they're done, sort of thing. So, and she said, I'll create a portal for you to get into the Castle of Shadows. You guys can get in there and just clear house, sort of thing. So they go along with this plan and they get into the Castle of Shadows, but they quickly realize it's not going to be that easy. And then one of the Malgrim kind of takes him under their wing. You can tell he's a little bit rogue from the other ones, but you can tell he also has evil intentions towards them. So it's this big tense kind of situation where they're guests in the Castle of Shadows, and in the process, Elminster's floating head is still in there, but one of the Malgrim managed to kind of capture him, and Elminster's kind of aura goes off the board, and people wonder what happened to him. Is he dead? How can he be dead? He's just been kind of magically captured at this point. So it's up to Sharantir and Belkram and Ithar to kind of take the fight to the Malgrim and release Elminster from this spell, which in the end, once all the fighting starts within the Castle of Shadows, that's exactly what happens, and they end up slaying Milvar, who is the Malgrim, who is spearheading this Cloak of Shadows plan. So they end up slaying all sorts of the bad guys, and then eventually escaping the castle and freeing Elminster from his magical captivity, and kind of winning the day against the Malgrim. So one more book to go in that series, and yes, I've already started working on it. Next up, a movie from the year 2015, which I thought I had probably reviewed in one of my videos, but then I realized this movie actually came out a lot longer ago than I thought it was. I knew it's been a while, but not 9 years. Mad Max Fury Road. Depends on your age, I guess, but if you're my age, you've probably seen the trilogy of Mad Max movies from the 80s with Mel Gibson. Fury Road was kind of a reboot of the Mad Max series in 2015, and it follows the lead character Max, whose name is Max Rockatansky or something like that, and basically it all takes place in Australia, and it's after some sort of nuclear wasteland accident has happened, and everything is just desolate and sand and nothing else. So we enter the movie as Max is out in this wasteland eating something outside of his car when he gets attacked and chased by some cars. He takes off, but eventually he gets tracked down, his car gets blown up, and he's taken captive. Now, who he's taken captive by is this freak named Immortan Joe, who controls a place called the Citadel. So in this area of Australia, in this storyline, you have the Citadel, which is these big, high kind of pieces of land that have water, that are able to mine water up through the ground, and they grow vegetables, they have water, so all around them is just desolate desert. And then the Citadel is kind of this paradise with access to water and food and stuff like that. But there's also Gastown, where there's a refinery where gasoline is produced, and then there's a bullet farm where all sorts of ammunition is produced. So you had these little compounds trading things to keep their settlements and their way of life going, sort of thing, in this desolate kind of land. So Immortan Joe takes Mad Max captive, and Mad Max is a universal donor. So the problem with this nuclear wasteland is that everybody's living a half-life. You know, everybody's got radiation sickness. So Immortan Joe's foot soldiers are these guys called war boys. They're all shaved bald. They all have this white paint all over them, and they're basically like, we only got half-lives to live anyway, so let's go out in a fucking blaze of glory, right? So they're kind of psychotic. So Max is a universal donor, so these guys are always getting sick and stuff. So blood transfusions are a thing they need, right? So Max is hooked up, and he's giving blood to these war boys that are sick. The one war boy that he's giving blood to is a guy named Nux, who is sick at the time. In the meantime, as all this is happening, Immortan Joe, one of his top lieutenants, is a woman missing one arm named Furiosa. He is her Imperator. Imperator Furiosa. I'm not sure what that means, but she's one of his top people, and she drives the war rig, which is a big armored semi-truck that is what is used to go between these compounds and make deliveries and bring stuff back, sort of thing. So she is setting out to, I think, go to both Gastown and the bullet farm to load up on everything. And so this expedition moves out and takes off, and so everything's hunky-dory. But all of a sudden, she veers the rig in a different direction, and everybody's like, what the fuck is she doing, blah, blah, blah. And soon enough, it's discovered back at the Citadel. Immortan Joe goes to check on his wives, which he keeps all the young hot chicks that are available as his kind of breeding women, and he goes to check on them, realizes they're gone. Furiosa has packed them all into the war rig and is trying to drive them to safety somewhere and get them out of the Citadel and their sex slave life to Immortan Joe, right? So they're just basically breeders. They're trying to give him children, right? So soon enough, like I said, Immortan Joe's in on the plan. He sets his war boys in chase of the war rig, and he's there himself chasing her. And so it turns into this chase sequence where Max is strapped to the front of Nux's car because he's not going to miss out on any potential glory of tracking down Furiosa. So Max is strapped to the front of the car with the lines for the blood going into the car into Nux. He's still getting a blood transfusion as he's driving out on this expedition, right? So in the end, all the chaos happens and Max gets free of his captivity and eventually catches up to Furiosa in the war rig after a big battle in a sandstorm. And he gets in a bit of a standoff with Furiosa, and at first they're at odds, but when they realize, they're going to be better as allies, they kind of come to this tentative kind of truce where Max joins their convoy and continues to flee from Immortan Joe, who is still in pursuit, and he has called in all of his allies from Gastown and the Bullet Farm and stuff. So eventually, it's just this chase from Immortan Joe and his forces for Furiosa to get these women to safety. And eventually, Nux joins their war party after he is kind of dissed by Immortan Joe, and his spirits and his beliefs are kind of dashed. So Nux ends up joining Max and Furiosa and the women in their flight and in their fight from Immortan Joe. And eventually they have success and they escape Immortan Joe's forces, and they come to this salty plain where they're like, we're just going to drive east as far as we can that way and hope that there's something for us on the other side. And Max is like, there's nothing out there, I can tell you that right now. You're just driving to your doom. He said the best plan, after he was going to desert them, he came back and gave them this advice. He says, your best plan is to go take the Citadel. Immortan Joe is out. All of his war boys are out looking for you. Drive right back past him. Take the Citadel for yourself, sort of thing. So then that's what the end of the movie is them going back the way they came, trying to beat Immortan Joe back to the Citadel and reclaim it. And of course, that's when the ultimate end fighting happens. And I'm not going to tell you how it ends, but it's pretty awesome. It's pretty fucking awesome. My buddies Josh and Simon and I, Civ, who I play video games with every Thursday, saw this movie in theaters way back, obviously in 2015, which is crazy, and we all fucking loved it, and we're like, oh my god, more of that, please, right? And it's just like with the filming of Jurassic Park, some of the sequences you see in this where there's guys flying through the air on these sticks trying to get at the war rig, and there's explosions everywhere, there's cars flipping and rolling. It's like, how the fuck do they film this shit, right? And a lot of that movie, from what I've heard, was actual live action filming, not much CG sort of thing. So, it's impressive how they bring things like this to life. And Mad Max, give the Oscar to it over all the other shit, that would have been out there around the same time, right? Like, hands down, in my opinion. But again, we don't get the respect we deserve with these types of movies, right? Now, Mad Max was the 6th item on my list that I added to this post because Josh and Simon and I, a couple Fridays ago, went to the theater to see the new Mad Max movie that's out right now called Furiosa. Furiosa is not a sequel to Mad Max Fury Road. It's actually a prequel. It shows how Imperator Furiosa became Imperator Furiosa. So there's a couple different time windows in this story. So it starts off when Furiosa is just a young girl. Her and her friend Valkyrie are out looking for fruit or something like that, and they hail in this area that's still, despite all the nuclear devastation that's happened, they have this little hidden secret area where there's stuff still grows and they can live a decent way of life. Now, one day when Furiosa and her friend Valkyrie are out looking for fruit, they find some evildoers on motorcycles in their kind of forest area, and they're like, shit, we can't let like, the biggest thing with this society is that we keep this place secret. Nobody else knows about this, or else they're going to try and take it, and it's going to lead to bloodshed, right? So the two girls see these guys, and Furiosa makes a bold play to sneak down and try and cut the gas lines on their motorcycles to try and keep them there and eventually deal with them, right? But she gets caught. These biker guys take off with her as captive. Valkyrie goes back, tells all the adults, and they're like, fuck, mobilize, right? So the first chase sequence in this movie is them trying to track down Furiosa, And during this chase, Furiosa is doing her best to try and stall these guys and take care of them, right, sort of thing. But she's just a young girl. She can't overpower them or anything, so she's kind of in a tricky situation. Now, eventually, the bikers succeed. Furiosa's mom gives chase and snipes a lot of them, but one guy still gets through in the end and brings Furiosa to the leader of this biker gang. His name is Dementus, and he's played by Chris Hemsworth. And I knew he was in this movie, but when I first saw him on screen, I was like, is that Chris Hemsworth? Like, overall, it kind of looks like him, but not really. Until I heard his voice, I was like, oh, it is. They did something with his face, like his nose is all weird and hooked. Like, they made him look a little bit different in the movie, where you're like, I'm pretty sure that's him, but I'm also not quite sure. So, but he was great. And so Dementus takes Furiosa captive, but eventually Furiosa's mom sneaks into the camp, and they get free. They get out on a motorcycle, but Dementus's gang is too close in pursuit. So Furiosa's mom gets off the motorcycle and says, "Take this and go, and don't look back." And then her mom stays behind to hold them off as long as she can. But eventually she gets captured, and they're about to crucify her, and Furiosa can't stand it. She comes back, her mom gets killed, and she gets taken captive again. So nothing good came out of that coming back. So Dementus eventually tries to attack the Citadel, where Immortan Joe's war boys and his faction inhabit, and he's unsuccessful. So instead, he goes and raids Gastown and takes Gastown over. So then, once he's in charge of Gastown, he's like, "Oh well, fuck! I'm a big boy now. I'm gonna go deal with Immortan Joe." And they work out a trade where Immortan Joe is gonna increase Dementus's rations on stuff. So they worked out kind of a deal. But Immortan Joe is also like, "I want the girl." So Dementus is like, "Oh, for fuck's sake, okay." So Furiosa is now in Immortan Joe's hands, and he takes her to the little locked area where Joe keeps his wives. But she's just a young kid at this point. She's like, "What the fuck is this? All this shit, right?" So one of Immortan Joe's sons, Rictus, takes a liking to Furiosa and is always kind of creeping on her. And eventually one night, because of him, she's able to escape the pen of wives and kind of blends into life in the Citadel, and hides in plain sight. You know, changes her appearance. I think she cuts her hair or something like that. So she looks just a really scrawny young boy. And she joins one of the crews, and eventually, I think it takes place over the next 10 years or something like that as she grows up. She ingratiates herself into this crew and keeps rising in the ranks, works on a brand new war rig, and eventually my ear, until she becomes Immortan Joe's imperator, sort of thing. So the rest of this movie erupts into one long chase where Furiosa tries to escape, and she becomes, but it doesn't work out, I think. Is that how it goes? And then she falls in with a guy named, shit. I can't remember his name, but he drives the war rig. He's the guy in charge of the war rig, and Furiosa keeps rising in the ranks until she becomes his kind of right-hand person. And they're the ones doing these runs back and forth. And at one point, the movie turns into this big, long, stretched out chase scene where her and this guy that drives the war rig are out doing a trade, an exchange of goods. And of course, they get attacked. I can't remember, it's by Dementus's people. Yeah. And the movie turns into this awesome chase scene with all these different sequences. Once you think the chase is finally over, it just evolves into another one, and it's the action and craziness in this sequence just blows your mind, sort of thing, right? And eventually Furiosa and the guy driving the war rig, her buddy, get taken captive by Dementus, and Dementus tortures them, eventually kills the guy, but Furiosa escapes, but at the cost of her arm. She gets hurt in this chase and loses her arm, and that's how we see that happen. So Furiosa eventually makes it back to the Citadel, and I forget how the rest of the sequence goes, but eventually the movie leads right in to where Furiosa has had enough of this bullshit from Immortan Joe and just this lifestyle of all this craziness. So it leads right in to where the night before we see the first departure of the war rig in the Fury Road movie, she goes and gets the wives from the pen and sneaks them into the war rig right at the end of this movie. So that's kind of how the movie ends, and it leads exactly right into Fury Road, right as it's kind of starting, sort of thing, which was cool. So I didn't know if it would do that or if it would just be a general story of Furiosa's kind of origins, but no, it's neat. It leads right into that movie. So apparently, this newest Mad Max thing was supposed to be a trilogy. I think there's supposed to be one more coming, but both movies I think kind of got caught up in delays. Like the Fury Road movie was supposed to, like, originally thought of being done in the, I think, the late 90s or early 2000s, and then it didn't get released until 2015. So it went through all this development hell and delays and stuff like that. And I think Furiosa went through a little bit of that, not quite to the same degree as Fury Road, but it got delayed a little bit too. So and I know George Miller, who comes up with all these movies, he's no spring chicken anymore. So I don't know if the plan is still for it to be a trilogy or whatever. But if they bring any more movies in this brand new Mad Max kingdom, I'm fully on board. If you haven't seen this movie, go see it in the theaters, because it is one of those movies that is such an experience on the big screen. We did the D-box with all the shaking seats and stuff, with all the cars and the engines rumbling and the explosions and stuff. It was fucking awesome. It was amazing. So highly recommend both movies. But I actually like Furiosa, the newer one, a tiny bit better than Fury Road. I went back and watched Fury Road after we saw that one in the theater, the new one in the theater, and I was like, my buddies liked Fury Road still a little bit better, but I was the opposite. I like Furiosa that a little bit better. Just that whole chase scene through the whole movie that just went on forever was just so nuts, so nuts. I just loved every bit of it. So highly recommend. Next up, we're going to finish with two video games from 2023. Illusion Island. Disney's Illusion Island. So this game is one of those Metroidvania type games. I didn't hear this term until the last couple of years, and it's one of those games where you set out and it's just a big map, and you have to backtrack and revisit areas when you get new powers or new abilities, sort of thing. It's you're all over the place, back and forth. So that's, I think, what a Metroidvania means. And the story is that Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Goofy, and Donald Duck get invited for a picnic in this land. They travel there, this Illusion Island, and once there, they're greeted by this little guy that he kind of looks like a little hamster creature. His name is Toku or something like that, and he belongs to a race called the Hokans. That's what these little creatures are called. And he's like, yeah, there's no picnic. I just kind of used that excuse to get you here because we got a bit of a problem. The three tombs of wisdom that were written long time ago that protect this island have been stolen by this evil being named Grazar, who plans to destroy everything and be evil and look over everything, right? So this Toku enlists the aid of these four heroes because they desperately want to be heroes, and they are all on board for helping him. So they set off through this land and with all these different areas to try and find these three tombs of wisdom. And once they find one, I think the Tomb of Astrology was one, the Tomb of History, and some other ones. You travel through the different areas of this map. There's all sorts of environmental obstacles, like spikes and pits and whatever. Is there fire, poison gas? I can't remember. Lots of different environmental things that can kill you, but then lots of enemies too. So you have to traipse your way through this area, back and forth, until you find all three of these tombs. And each tomb is guarded by a boss. And once you defeat him, it turns to stone, and you're free to go take the book to Toku and put it back on the library shelf. But however, there's a twist to this story. So if you are interested in playing this, you might not want to listen to this part. But once you gain all the books for Toku, he reveals that, this is actually my plan to take over the land, and thanks for getting these books. So it turns out the bosses you defeated were actually good guys, and you went and gave them a clobbering and took their book, much to their chagrin, sort of thing. And you're just helping this evil mastermind Toku further his aims. And so in the end, you have to reverse what you've done and then face down the final boss, which is Grayzar. And there's a bit of a twist with who the boss is too, because you've actually met him earlier in the game. You just didn't know you'd met him. So this game was fun, but you know, it controlled really smoothly. It looked really good, but it was just kind of lacking in diversity, lacking in excitement. It wasn't that challenging, but the gameplay experience was so good that it's still worth playing in my mind. I just felt like there could be a little more I don't know, excitement and danger and a little more difficulty. Again, I don't want a ton of difficulty because I've played a lot of really hard games in my life, and any more of those might give me a heart attack, but you expect a little bit of difficulty, right? But maybe with it being, you know, Mickey and Minnie and those guys, maybe it's aimed at a younger kind of audience where it needs to be a bit easier. But yeah, I think there could have just been a little bit more added to this game to make it a little more interesting and a little better. But overall, still a good play, and I had a lot of fun with it. But if you like those Metroidvania style games, this one's pretty good for that type of gameplay. So just don't overpay for it. You know, it's one of those ones that I wouldn't want to pay more than, I don't know, I guess it's a Disney title. I wouldn't pay more than $30 for it. Ideally, you'd like to get it in that $19.99 kind of range, but that's just my opinion. Next up, another game that you don't want to overpay for: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade: Wrath of the Mutants. This is a 2024 game, just came out a couple months ago maybe, and it's based on a 2017 arcade game called Wrath of the Mutants, and which is an arcade game based on the 2012 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated series. So it's the one where Bebop is that weird looking creature, and he's always like hee hee doing the Michael Jackson things, and you remember him? Fish Face, Tiger Claw are some of the enemies that are kind of exclusive to that series that hadn't come before, sort of thing. So there's not much story to it. It's just you're basically the Turtles. You're playing through all these levels to try and get to Shredder and defeat him, sort of thing. So it's just your classic Turtles go after Shredder kind of storyline. Not much to it. And I think there's I think there's 6 total levels. There's New York City, the sewers, the amusement park, TCRI, Dimension X, and Shredder. Yeah, so there's 6 levels, and the levels aren't very long, and the levels aren't very hard, except on hard difficulty. I could beat them all except, well, I couldn't beat the TCRI level, I think, which you have to unlock you have to beat all 5 levels to unlock the Shredder level. So I don't know if I would have been able to beat the Shredder level on hard or not. Probably not, because you face Shredder at the end and then he turns into Super Shredder and you have to do a double boss fight. But I was able to get most of the levels done on hard as well, but normal and easy or simple. Yeah, the levels don't take long. There's not a lot of moves you can do. There's not a lot of story. There's no additional characters to use. There's no collectibles to find. I really enjoyed the gameplay in the game. I really enjoyed the action, but this was like one of those games where everything about it looks and seems good. You know, like, great idea. Yes, bring this part of an arcade game, a Ninja Turtles arcade game, to the consoles, because I love the Turtles, and there's so many good Turtles games, but they just didn't put enough in it. You can get through this game, all 6 levels, in an hour, maybe, you know, and that's your game, you know. Oh, I just played through all 6 levels in an hour, game over, put it on the shelf, right? Like, and like I said, there's no additional characters you can try and unlock or additional content. It's just a very bare bones game. Not a lot of moves you can do. It's very kind of basic. This game is very basic. It looks good, it controls good, but what it includes and any kind of replayability factor or longevity, there's nothing there. So take this game for what it is. It's a fun, quick experience, especially if you love the Turtles, which I do. But again, this is a game you're not going to want to overpay for. I wouldn't I would say 10 to 15 bucks for this one, right? Because it's just there's so little there, that you're going to be done in an hour, and it's like, okay, on to the next game sort of thing, right? So that's my only recommendation there. For both those games, don't overpay, but especially for the Turtles ones, because it's just such a short experience. Although it's fun, it's way too short. So those are my 6 items for today. I hope to be back with you very shortly for another video of this type, because yeah, I do already have 1 or 2 items completed, and of course there are more on the way. So I will see you soon. Toodles. Meow.